Real estate, real estate, real estate. The prices are coming down in Canada. Some people are concerned. Others are looking at this as an opportunity to build out their real estate portfolio. And if that's you, this video is for you. This is the Commandments of Wealth podcast. I'm Joel.
This is Alex. And we are wealth managers from a wealth management firm based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where we serve 6, 7, and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors Canada-wide, coast to coast.
And we're going to be going over some of the insights, lessons, and strategies that we have implemented with our clients to help protect their wealth, build their wealth, and pass on their wealth to the next generation. And today we have a topic at hand that is right in that ballpark. I guess we'll bring up the article.
Let's do it. So we have an article from MoneySense today, September 26th, 2022, buying a second home, how it works in Canada. So while this is a great article, there's more to buying a home than just, can you afford the mortgage and do you have the cash flow to support that?
Yeah.
That's why you're watching this video. You want to know, is there a more efficient way, to buy and hold a property? Because again, as with everything, the CRA wants to basically got a cut of your profits, right?
Yeah.
I have a small, joke. I know they can't see the image on the screen, but it's like when it's you investing, it's your risk. But when it's time to reap the rewards, it's our profit.
Yeah.
But that being said, so we can get started by looking at, so can you explain, Joel, what a primary residence is?
Sure.
And if you were to get a property other than a primary residence, what is that considered?
Yeah. So in the article, as you can see here, it talks about what counts as a second home. A second home. You can have a second home, you can have a third home, but technically in Canada, you can have one primary residence, right? And one primary residence, the beauty of that in Canada is that if you had a property that was worth, for example, $1 million today, and 30 years from now, it's worth $4 million, that $3 million growth in that time period, you would pay no taxes on that. Yes,
Right.
There would be some closing costs associated to real estates and lawyers, but all of that would be a capital gain that you would profit. If you buy a second home, technically, this is considered now an investment property. And on investment properties held in your personal name, there will be a capital gains associated to that. So to give you an example, that same property, $1 million,
Right.
that grows to 4, that $3 million of growth is called a capital gain. 50% would be taxable in your name. And if you're looking to accumulate multiple properties, there are better ways to do that, which would be looking at trying to incorporate that in a corporation.
So that brings us to, I think the rules around buying a investment property, because it's not really a second property.
Yeah.
Like, if we're getting down to the brass tacks, sure, from our perspective it would be, but from the CRA
If
standpoint,
you're virtue signaling, you can call it a second home at your friend's group while you're having coffee, right?
yeah,
But in reality, like you're saying,
it's considered an investment property.
exactly.
Right? Anything outside of a primary residence is an investment property. And one of the biggest differences with an investment property is that it doesn't benefit from that tax shelter under the provision of what's called a primary residence.
Yeah.
So you're basically going to be, all things being equal, dealing with that capital gain. But like you're about to talk about, when it comes to how you can structure owning additional property, like within a corporation, there's ways that you can defer that tax. So let's say an example. Let's say that we have a person named Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, he had his primary residence. He bought an investment property. He's now about to buy a second investment property. He hears about us. He starts talking to us, and we're saying, okay, you know what? You can own a corporation, have these properties under a corporation. And he says to himself, well, you know what? That sounds great. I wish I had my properties under this corporation from the beginning, but now I'm afraid that if I move them under, aren't I going to trigger some kind of capital gain?
You're absolutely right. It's a great question. So the first thing to bring up, which is kind of highlighted here on the second point, is, and I'm sure a lot of people already know this, the way and the rules associated to buying an investment property are a little bit different than buying a primary residence.
Yeah.
If you're buying a investment property, or how they classify here, a second home, you're usually going to have to go through a more tenuous buying procedure. You're gonna have to have a larger down payment. You're gonna have to prove more personal income, sometimes corporate income as well. So that's one of the first things and they're gonna put you through a stress test too. And now that goes across the board in Canada based on the recent developments since COVID. But when you have that's your example, right? This person already had a second property. Obviously, there would be some growth on it. And if he were to sell it, right, today he's going to incur capital gains, like we mentioned. There is actually a rule that will allow you to roll your property over into a corporation. It's called Section 85 of the CRA tax code.
Exactly.
And that allows you to roll your property over, mark down the paper capital gain on that date that you rolled into corporation, but you will only actually physically own money to the CRA when you physically sell that property in the corp.
Yeah.
So you're marking down the paper capital gain, but you're not out of pocket.
Yes.
Because Section 85 allows you to roll it over. And the beauty of doing that is that you're allowed to now get a little bit more creative in terms of maximizing your dollars. So how it would work is you'd have an umbrella corporation. You've rolled over your investment property inside the corp. And remember, a corporation is paying 13% tax.
Exactly.
The lowest tax bracket a person could be at is 20%.
And you're probably not owning real estate if you're only have enough income to warrant 20% income tax. Yeah.
And this rule is available to everybody, right? So what you would do is you have a umbrella corporation or an opco. You'd roll over your investment property, Section 85, using it into a holdco under the umbrella. And then that would allow you to use those dollars and accumulate faster income. You're basically not having the tax or the growth cut off by taxes. You're not having the growth of the real estate cut off by taxes. So you're accumulating more cash flow inside the corp, and that would allow you to buy additional properties inside the corp. Right? So you're speeding up the process of aggregating capital, compounding capital, leaving a larger estate.
Okay. So basically what you just covered was using Section 85 from the Income Tax Act.
Yeah.
Somebody is able to say, okay, hey, I would, if I sold this property, this investment property, I would owe, let's say, $1 million capital gain, which would be 50% of $1 million.
On a personal level.
On a personal level.
Yeah.
Right? But if I use this Section 85, rollover, I can move that property. The government will earmark that $1 million as what the 50% capital gain would be applied to
On the date you rolled.
the date that it's being rolled over. It's now going to be in the corporation, but you don't have to pay that capital gain out of pocket. In fact, you only have to pay the capital gain when the corporation sells that real estate.
Exactly.
So you could effectively hold it indefinitely and defer it. I mean, eventually
You can
you're
defer
gonna,
it.
you're going to defer it. Like, maybe you hold it until you pass away and it's someone else's problem. But
Then we'll get into trust later.
Yeah, we'll get into trust. But the point being is that it's much more efficient over the long term when it comes to extracting value out of that corporation, out of that real estate, to have it under the corporate structure rather than the personal structure. So it's amazing that we have this ability to move the real estate in without taking the hit up front, because let's face it, taking the hit up front might derail you from doing the entire
It
strategy.
absolutely would, right? Because you're going to be out of pocket, cold hard cash.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll take you longer to make up that and then some.
Exactly. And your example, right, of the person who's knocking on our door wanting to buy a second property, if this person would have did this, and over time as they managed their cash flow, they got rid of their interest expense, maybe they also got rid of any renovations, like the property is done. It's cash flow positive now to a big degree. It's going to allow you to accumulate more money inside the corp, build up a larger deposit to make that down payment.
Exactly.
And what you would really want to do, if we're getting a little bit sexy, is again, each property would have its own holdco under the umbrella, right? Do you know why we do that? You for sure already know.
Yeah. So that's what we were talking about earlier, right? The reason why you do that is for liability protection primarily.
Yeah.
So let's say that somebody slips and falls on one of the properties that they're renting under you, and they say like, well, I know Mr. Smith is loaded. He's got like 10 properties. I'm going to take him for everything he has. How dare he neglect to maintain this one, right?
Not enough salt in the Canadian winter.
Yeah, not enough salt for the Canadian winter. How dare he, right? They can only legally go after that one specific property in that one specific silo under the umbrella.
Exactly.
Right? So, I mean, from a business perspective, as the owner, it doesn't interfere with your revenue, your taxes, your small business deductions. All of that stuff is still going to be, the same. But from a legal standpoint, it's any damage or legalities are limited to that specific property. So if you had 5 real estate properties and each one is generating you roughly $30,000 a year, then you'd want each of those real estate properties to be in their own respective hold companies underneath the overall umbrella corporation, Mr. Smith's, real estate LTD, or whatever you want to call it. Something else that I wanted to talk on quickly is just like what we talked about in our last video about, corporations and business owners being able to reduce their taxes. You can also use the same strategy, right? You get a permanent life insurance, right, in your property, in your corporation that's owned by the corporation. That's going to basically offset the estate tax values that would be, owed on the real estate, right? Based on the life of, the shareholders, let's say as an example. What's going to happen is now, since these businesses are generating passive income, they're going to be grinding down your small business deduction, which if you want to know more about that, watch the previous video. All right. So having permanent life insurance allows you to use the low tax rate that the corporation's going to be paying. Use those dollars, because again, if you're paying minimum 20% tax on your personal self, 13% on the business level, it's much cheaper for you, after tax. Fund the permanent insurance policy.
With the cash flow that's being generated from the real estate.
With the cash flow that's being generated from the real estate. So what's going to happen is it's going to then build up value, equity in the policy, which is going to not count as passive income.
And this is just a CRA rule associated to insurance.
Yes.
Right. So you're bolting. You can also bolt on, and we do this for a lot of our clients. You bolt on an insurance contract which has an investment component, and because of the rules associated to insurance in this country, Canada, it's allowing you also to grow that asset at a more efficient rate, tax deferred. So it's not counting on passive income. This is giving you the opportunity and flexibility to create more CDA space, dividend out more income, grow a larger estate, do all kinds of things. It gives you a lot more flexibility.
Exactly. And then with those capital dividend account credits that you'd mentioned, because this type of insurance is really the only way that you can get an investment that will create this CDA room. That CDA room is what's going to allow you to flow through the lion's share of the wealth accumulated in that policy to the shareholders with a much more tax efficient manner, right? So that being said, that's really the advantage of holding buying investment properties, especially if you take it to the next level, which is holding them in a corporate structure so that you retain a lot more of that value. And we didn't even touch on the fact that you can borrow against the policy to further, use down payments towards further investments. You can leverage the real estate itself, leverage out the wazoo, right?
You can leverage the insurance policy as well, which doesn't count as income to the corp. All kinds of crazy stuff.
Exactly. So let's say that the commandment of the day, I think that it would really be squeeze every dollar.
You got to maximize every dollar, but you got to know the rules. You have to take some time. And I like to compare it to football, right? Canadian football, American football, it's a little bit different, but we're in football season now. Canadian football, the width of the field is much more narrow.
Yes.
So if you take an American football and you throw him on the Canadian football and you say just go, and he doesn't realize that the width of the field is shorter, he's going to be jumping out of bounds as he jukes left every other day. Right?
And the CRA wins if you don't know the rules. So again, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll leave the link in the description as usual. Please like, comment, subscribe, reach out to us if you have any questions, especially if you'd like to see just how this can be applied to you. So once again, stay tuned for the next one.
Have a good one, everybody.
Take care. Ciao.